What untold stories are hidden in our history, folks? Have you ever wondered if entire civilizations vanished without a trace, as if they never existed? Is it possible that highly advanced technology, centuries ahead of its time, was used in wars we know nothing about? What's the secret behind mysterious events like mud floods that buried entire cities, or earthquakes that reshaped the land overnight? And are there ancient conspiracies whose secrets we're only now uncovering? Let's dive deep into astonishing tales that might just change your perspective on the history we were taught. You won't believe this story, folks. There's a lot of talk swirling around the great Tartarian Empire, which might have left behind magnificent, luxurious cities. What happened to them? Could the legends we've heard our whole lives about the 7 cities of gold be more than just tales? Was there a civilization called Hyperborea that existed until the mid-16th century, as Mercator's map suggests? The stories claim these indigenous people were so clever that they outsmarted the Spanish invaders, leading them to Florida to discover vast empires with citizens living in luxury and wealth, where even their most basic objects were crafted from gold and jewels. Do you think this is true? The picture gets even bigger, folks, when we learn that entire cities have been found 200 feet underwater. Mysterious and wondrous ancient cities and buildings that might have been preserved by water for centuries. These discoveries have turned the archaeological world upside down, making scholars believe many legends and stories they once thought were fiction. Like Cleopatra's Palace in Alexandria, discovered in 1998, which was one of the most significant finds, revealing ancient Egyptian civilization and yielding everyday objects and exquisite sculptures. Then there are the enigmatic Yonaguni-jima pyramids in Japan, China's Qiandao city, dubbed China's Atlantis, and the Baia Archaeological Park in Italy, where it's said the city sank underwater due to a volcanic earthquake. The images we see of these sites are mysterious and perplexing, revealing an entirely different world, a world largely unknown to most people in our modern era. The plot thickens when we delve into the story of the Great Quake of 1811 and 1812. Imagine, folks, from December 16, 1811 until March 1812, over 2,000 earthquakes struck the American Midwest. And in New Madrid, Missouri, at the confluence of the Ohio and Mississippi rivers, there were 6,000 to 10,000 earthquakes. In the known history of the world, no other earthquakes lasted this long and caused such immense destruction as the New Madrid quakes. This was a series of 3 massive main shocks, known as the New Madrid earthquakes, named after the town that was the largest settlement on the Mississippi River between St. Louis and Natchez. These earthquakes were so immense that their damage zone covered 600,000 square kilometers, about 230,000 square miles, and the felt area reached 5 million square kilometers, about 2 million square miles. They caused complex natural changes, classifying them as some of the largest earthquakes to strike America since European settlement. They were the largest ever east of the Rocky Mountains in America and Canada. The strong shaking zone associated with these quakes was 2 or 3 times larger than the 1964 Alaska earthquake, and 10 times larger than the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. Folks, the New Madrid earthquakes were felt as far as Canada and the East Coast, ringing church bells in Boston and Philadelphia, and the ground continued to move for a full 4 months. They destroyed many towns and created an 18-mile-long, 5-mile-wide lake, Reelfoot Lake in Tennessee. People felt the earthquake strongly over an area of 130,000 square miles and moderately over about 3 million square miles. The impact was devastating and widespread. The disturbance was so violent that it created Reelfoot Lake 15 miles south of New Madrid and submerged an entire Indian village along the Mississippi River. Even stranger, the river itself miraculously flowed backwards for hours. This might have been a tsunami-like event, worsened by groundwater surging for miles along the shore, causing a rapid rise in the riverbed's water level. The earthquakes were felt as far as the White House itself, and they say church bells in Boston rang on their own, untouched by human hands. Just before the first earthquake, people reported strange animal behavior. Many animals were anxious and scared, pets became wild, and wild animals became tame. Snakes emerged from the ground from their winter hibernation. Flocks of ducks and geese landed close to people. What's bizarre is that in 1811, a large, bright comet appeared in the sky. It was visible to the naked eye for approximately 260 days. In America, it was called Tecumseh's Comet, and in Europe, it was called Napoleon's Comet. The last time this comet was seen was during the time of Pharaoh Ramses II, 3,065 years ago. The comet's arrival was immediately followed by the New Madrid earthquakes, the largest earthquakes in American history. These events are linked to the Black Sun prophecy. Tecumseh himself was an important spiritual leader and warrior of the Shawnee tribe. His name means shooting star or he who walks across the sky. His brother, a religious leader known as the Prophet, predicted a solar eclipse in 1806. Indiana Governor William Henry Harrison was concerned about the Prophet's popularity. The Prophet then announced another solar eclipse, which indeed occurred on September 17, 1811. Oh, the mystery.
The story doesn't end here. There's a part about the island of California. A passage from an old 16th century Spanish romance novel states, "Know ye that at the right hand of the Indies there is an island called California, very close to the terrestrial paradise, which was inhabited by black women, without a single man among them, whose mode of living was Amazon-like. They had strong and robust bodies, a fervent and great heart, and great strength. The island itself is the strongest in steep cliffs and craggy rocks that exist in the world. Their weapons were all of gold, and likewise the harnesses of the wild beasts, which they rode after taming them. There was no other metal on the whole island at all. In this island, called California, there were many griffins, and when they had young, these women would take them to their caves, and there they raised them, and they fattened them on these men and boys they bore. Any male who entered the island was killed and eaten by them. That island, called California, was governed by a great queen of large body, very beautiful for her lineage, in her flourishing age, desirous in her thoughts of achieving great things, brave in her strength and cunning in her valiant heart more than any other ruler who had governed that kingdom before her, Queen Calafia." Folks, this 17th century map by Nicholas Sanson depicts California as an island. And this is just one of 800 similar maps collected by Glenn McLaughlin and donated to Stanford University. The word California itself might even come from the Arabic word Khalif or Caliph, referring to a Muslim leader. This aligns with the fact that the Moors, who are Tartars, what a connection, who were Muslims, ruled parts of Spain from 757 to 1492. This was a fictional account of the conflict between Christians and Muslims during the Crusades. Do you think the Wonder Woman legends were actually Queen Calafia's lands? When Wonder Woman's home first appeared in 1941, it was called Paradise Island, a secret, hidden island on Earth where the mythical Amazons lived. It was said that these Amazons took a respite from the conflicts of the man's world and began a new life to better themselves, isolating themselves on this island far from ancient Greece after Hercules enslaved them. Paradise Island was blessed by the Olympian gods, and no man was allowed to set foot on it. These Amazons were truly skilled in a specialty called bullets and bracelets. They could deflect bullets aimed at them with their chain-linked bracelets. Initially, Paradise Island was believed to be in the Pacific Ocean. Then in the 1970s TV series, its location was specified as the Bermuda Triangle, and in the 2009 animated film, it was said to be in the Aegean Sea. The Amazons lived in Themyscira for centuries, in perfect harmony with their surroundings, under a religious rule. They knew nothing of racism, even if some considered the lost Antiope tribe as mere savages. They didn't even conceive of the concept of males. The word polis was foreign to them until Diana ventured into the outside world. Homosexuality was very natural for them, and some were virgins, while others had beloved companions. Their entire city was built in the Greco-Roman style from 1200 BC, and their clothing was Greek and Roman, wearing sandals and ancient armor. All Amazons wore bracelets of submission as a constant reminder of their servitude and obedience to their guardians. Yet only Diana could deflect bullets with hers. They were very religious, worshiping their gods as living deities, with Artemis as their primary goddess, to whom they offered deer sacrifices. Every year, the Amazons celebrate their creation in the Feast of the Five to remember the goddesses who gave them life. The name California itself harks back to a centuries-old tale of an island full of gold ruled by black women who fed men to their pet griffins. Like other Amazonian legends, the island of California was a place of powerful, self-sufficient women who sought men attention on their own terms. This story still resonates in California, which has had a long history of reconstructing gender roles. And it's fitting that the state, which has been a frontier for all of these issues, took its name from a mythical story where race, gender, and religion intertwine. Finally, the story of an island full of gold predicted the search for gold, the gold rush that changed the idea of the California dream worldwide. There's a mural of Queen Calafia and her Amazons in the Mark Hopkins Hotel in San Francisco.
A Moorish African emperor named Abu Bakari is said to have led 1,000 ships to the New World in the 14th century. That's why Moorish navigators and sailors were highly sought after back then, because Europeans, who were previously landlocked, were still in their infancy in navigation and seafaring. A black man owned the San Fernando Valley. This was Pio de Jesus Pico, 1801 to 1894, the last Mexican governor of California. In total, in the 19th century, there were at least 4 black governors of California. Calafia is part of California's history, confirming that when Cortez named this place California, he had 300 black people with him. And throughout the entire Spanish-Mexican War, 40% of the population was black. In 1535, Cortez led a return expedition to Calafia's land, or California, and decided to name it Santa Cruz. But the name didn't stick. The indigenous people, Moors, black and red Indians, and alleged whites all continued to use the old name California. Cortez himself and his contemporaries also used this name. In 1550 and 1556, the name appeared 3 times in reports about Cortez written by Giovanni Battista Ramusio. Thus, over the years of increasing invasion and colonization and the appropriation of California's land, the ancient land of the Moors maintained its name and identity, with the understanding that one day it would return to its original state. Even more bizarre, over 800 maps depicting California as an island until the early 19th century are preserved in the Stanford University Research Library. And of course, the Jesuits were the ones who claimed that the entire island of California was a myth. Although some old maps showed California as part of the mainland, the strong refutation of the island theory came in 1701 when the Jesuit explorer Eusebio Kino crossed the Baja Peninsula and observed through a telescope that it was part of the continent. But more than 250 maps from the 17th and 18th centuries show California as an island. The definitive catalog of California as an island maps is McLaughlin's Mapping California as an Island. The first map in this catalog dates back to 1621. Island maps continued into the 19th century, even though the Spanish explorer Father Kino showed California's connection to the mainland in 1705 when he walked across it from New Mexico. However, because there were no accurate maps of the New World in the 17th century, cartographers relied on older sources. Hapgood traces these old sources back to maps preserved in Constantinople and later distributed by the Turks. This indicates that the original sources were few, as they all fell into certain categories based on map features. For example, some show the island of California with a flat top, and others show it with a W shape. McLaughlin classifies these groups based on the shape of the island's upper part. And since no explorers had mapped California coast at this stage, there was no way for cartographers to know which source was correct. What's strange is that it turned out both sources were correct. They were drawn at different times and different ocean levels.
Polk records the very slow progress of exploration along the California coast for the next 2 centuries. She recounts how Cortez only mapped the lower part of the Gulf of California. Alarcon sailed into the Gulf to the Colorado River in 1540 and led a canoe far up the river, but left no map. Explorer Oñate reached the mouth of the Colorado at the head of the Gulf in 1604, a century after Columbus's voyage. In the late 19th century, Spanish trading ships followed ocean currents from the Far East to the Mendocino region and then headed south to Baja, but they didn't venture close to the coast and therefore provided only limited information about California's geography. In 1603, on a secret and arduous journey, Vizcaíno explored California's Pacific coast all the way to Cape Blanco in Oregon, where they assumed there was a large river that was the desired passage to the Atlantic Ocean. In all these explorations, Polk emphasizes the political pressure on explorers and cartographers to discover that California was an island. It was in the interest of people like Cortez for California to be an island because Cortez was promised to rule an island.
Folks, the northern part of California's Pacific coast has been pushed eastward by about 200 miles. This region extends from the island's northern tip down to Point Conception in the south. This part of the coast doesn't resemble the current coastline at all. In the overlay map, the island's northeast corner forms a point of a mountain range that ends at Willamette National Forest east of Eugene, and this flat upper part follows the break visible in the coastal range directly south of Eugene. Many California as an island maps from the 17th and 18th centuries show the island's northern tip in a distinctive M shape. McLaughlin classifies these maps into groups based on whether the upper part is flat or concave. This M shape was a result of the later eastward push of the coastal and Cascade mountain ranges around Portland. And the salt lakes east of the northeast corner are evidence that there was a lot of salt water there after the ocean receded. Further south on the Pacific side of the island's flat upper part, we find that the coastline from the island's tip to Point Conception extends 200 miles further into the ocean than it does now. Since the geography of the coast is significantly different from today, the Vingboons map offers no points of agreement with modern features. Vingboons embellished this part of the coast with many future names that bore no resemblance to what early explorers saw, but he assigned them the names the Spanish gave to the modern features they found in this display. What caused this 200-mile eastward movement of the coastline? Although changes in ocean level played a small role in the coast's shape, the major cause was the plate movement of the Pacific seabed. There are 2 major fault lines that extend across the Pacific Ocean, starting from the Hawaiian island chain and meeting the continent at Eureka in the north and Point Conception of the south, at Eureka via the Murray Fracture Zone, and at Point Conception via the Mendocino Fracture Zone. These faults don't stop at the Pacific coast, they continue all the way to the east coast, with the northern fault reaching New York and the southern fault reaching the active seismic zone in North Carolina. These faults gradually led to the continent's concavity from east to west, starting with the inundation along the Appalachian Mountains, and the buried uplift in the Midwest under the Mississippi River Valley sediments was the site of the great earthquakes of 1811 and 1812. Then the Rocky Mountains rose, followed by the Wasatch Range in Utah, and finally the folded hills of Nevada. Finally, after the Vingboons map was made, the Sierra Nevada and California coastal ranges were pushed. These 2 ranges do not appear on an otherwise very accurate map. We must assume they were not present on the source maps because they didn't exist yet. The formation of these 2 latter ranges is what pushed the coastline on the map more than 200 miles eastward to its current location. This eastward shift can be seen in California's geological map. The oldest metamorphic and sedimentary rocks are in dark blue. There's a sharp discontinuity in these rocks between the Murray and Mendocino faults. The formation of the Sierra Nevada Range pushed this mass eastward by about 50 miles. The oldest metamorphic and sedimentary rocks were pushed eastward to what became the Sierra Nevada Range. The Great Gold Rush of 1849 occurred because the Sierra Nevada Range rose, exposing massive amounts of gold and silver on the surface, meaning you could collect gold nuggets without needing to dig with a pickaxe. That's why ships came from as far away as China to San Francisco, and wagons could cross the Great Salt Lake, which until then was still fed by the ocean. This explains the presence of oceanic fossils in the Great Salt Lake and why no one could reach California until the mid-19th century. Folks, what's this whole story about?
While all this was happening, the Great California Flood of 1862 occurred. This was the largest flood in recorded Oregon, Nevada, and California history, happening from December 1861 to January 1862. It was preceded by weeks of continuous rain and snow in very high areas that began in Oregon in November 1861 and continued until January 1862. This was followed by a record amount of rain from January 9 to 12, causing a flood that extended from the Columbia River south in western Oregon, across California to San Diego, and inland to Idaho and Washington Territory, Nevada and Utah in Utah Territory, and Arizona and western New Mexico Territory. This event dropped the equivalent of 10 feet of rain in California, in the form of rain and snow, over 43 days. Oh my goodness. The massive snowfalls in the mountains of the far American West caused more floods in Idaho, Arizona, New Mexico, and Sonora, Mexico, in the following spring and summer as the snow melted. And this event culminated in a severe warm storm that led to the melting of an enormous amount of snow. This snowmelt caused valley floods, submerging or sweeping away cities, mills, dams, flumes, homes, fences, and livestock, and destroying fields. It was described as the worst disaster ever to strike California.
And now we come to the part that will truly blow your mind. In the winter of 1840, the Western Emigration Society was founded in Missouri, and 500 individuals pledged to travel west to Mexican California. Among them were Baldridge, Barnett, Bartleson, Bidwell, and Nye. This group was organized on May 18, 1841, electing Talbot H. Greene president, John Bidwell secretary, and John Bartleson captain. This group joined Father Pierre-Jean de Smet's Jesuit missionary party, led by Thomas F. Fitzpatrick, and traveled west through the South Pass along the Oregon Trail. This trail led them past Court and Jail Rocks, Chimney Rock, Scotts Bluff, Fort Laramie, and Independence Rock. The Bartleson-Bidwell party separated from Fitzpatrick and the missionary group at Soda Springs on August 11. And about 152 years ago, fellow Freemason Peter Lassen led 12 wagons from Missouri to California, blazing the treacherous and infamous Lassen Trail. After months of hardship, he successfully delivered new settlers to Benton City in the northernmost part of the state. On November 23, 1848, Levi Stowell was appointed the new lodge's master. And on November 15, 1849, the lodge was formally organized. After meeting the requirements of the Grand Lodge of California, Sacramento Lodge No. 40 was chartered on May 6, 1854, and received No. 40, indicating it was the 40th lodge of ancient free and accepted Masons to be chartered in California. Lafayette Lodge No. 126 was chartered by the Grand Lodge of California on May 13, 1858. This lodge is located in Sebastopol, California, which is essentially an agricultural community north of San Francisco. To this day, Lafayette Lodge maintains the traditions of a small-town community. Folks, there's a story about the Jesuit Joseph Justus Scaliger, 1540 to 1609, who is called the chief engineer of modern historical forgery. He was a French Jesuit theologian and scholar known for expanding the concept of classical history to include ancient Persian, Babylonian, Jewish, and Egyptian history. In 1601, Gaspar Schioppius, who worked for the Jesuits, published his book Scaliger Hypobolemius, a 400-page volume. This author claims to have found 500 lies in Scaliger's book on the antiquity of the Jews. Scaliger's chronological pressure and all these oddities lead historians to conclude that, quote, the Middle Ages were the time when all ideas relating to chronological dependence were lost. Monks with crosses and incense at Alexander the Great's funeral, Catilina attending Mass, Orpheus becomes a contemporary of Aeneas, Sardanapalus a Greek king, and Julian the Apostate a papal priest. Everything takes on a fantastic hue in this world. This very much confuses the modern historian. AF. Quote, "The most obvious contradictions and bizarre fantasies live in peace." Who is forging this history and why?
The Jesuits, Knights Templar, and Freemasons were all well established in San Francisco by 1849. There's a photo of a Knights Templar parade in San Francisco on August 20th, 1883. And this Masonic building was built in 1905 and 1906-1907. The building was home to two institutions, the Knights Templar and the Baptist Church. The building was originally built for the Golden Gate Commandery No. 16 of the Knights Templar, a turn-of-the-century Masonic order. A grand parade was held at the Grand Conclave on August 20th, 1883. The first Masonic lodge in San Francisco was built on Montgomery Street in 1860, and of course, it burnt down in the 1906 fire. In 1911, the Masonic Temple Association laid the 12-ton cornerstone, the largest in California at the time, for the new building. And 2 years later, talk about people who could build back then, a grand parade of 8,000 Masons, with Knights Templar on horseback, celebrated the Grand Triennial Convocation of 1904. This was the most important event that occurred in San Francisco in 1906 after the infamous earthquake and fire. But 2 years earlier, in 1904, the most important and distinguished event was the impressive gathering of Knights Templar from the Grand Encampment of the United States. San Francisco was literally handed over to host the 29th Triennial Conclave. A simple example of the lavish treatment the city provided shows the importance of this event. Market Street, San Francisco's main thoroughfare, was adorned with columns topped with Knights Templar crosses. And the Ferry Building, at the foot of Market Street, and the most important building at the time, was decorated with lights and featured a luminous Knights Templar cross on the side facing the city. The Grand Lodge of California building was fully illuminated at every corner, including the square and compasses, the Knights Templar cross, the cross and crown, etc. What a shame this beautiful building on Market Street was destroyed by the earthquake and fire 2 years later. Golden Gate Park was filled with floral arrangements forming Masonic symbols of all kinds. Business sessions were held in Golden Gate Hall, and the San Francisco Pavilion was extensively decorated for the festivities. These festivities lasted from August 31 to September 6 and culminated in a spectacular parade down Market Street to Van Ness Avenue. The leaders who participated in this conclave had commemorative medals struck to immortalize the experience, which was a personal pleasure for the Knights to exchange medals and collect a set to take home. The Grand Master was Sir Knight Henry Bates Stoddard of Texas. He was received in Oakland by the Grand Commander of California, the commanders of California Commandery No. 1 and Golden Gate Commandery No. 16, and an escort of Sir Knights. He then crossed San Francisco Bay by ferry to the Ferry Building, where he was received by an even more elaborate guard. The record states, at the ferry station, companies A, B, C, D, and E of California Commandery were mounted on well-groomed black horses and under the command of Sir Knight Reuben H. Hurlbut, Grand Captain General, on a snow-white horse, arrayed for escort duty. And the Grand Master, past Grand Master, Grand Generalissimo, and Commander of California Commandery rode in the carriage drawn by 4 white horses. Several other carriages followed them. And special attention was paid to the delegation from Great Britain. Great attention was paid to the distinguished delegation from the Grand Priory of England during the members' stay in San Francisco. The visit in itself was a distinction, representing the fraternal relations between the governing bodies of the 2 largest Templar jurisdictions in the world. And in another sense, it was very representative, as the Earl of Euston, in his official capacity, was the personal representative of Edward VII, King of England, who for many years had been the actual head of craft masonry in England and had always been a patron of the order in that jurisdiction. A drill competition was held at the entertainment grounds in Golden Gate Park. Prizes were won by various commanderies. And the launching of the armored cruiser USS Milwaukee was timed to coincide with this conclave. This took place at the Union Iron Works along the San Francisco Bay shoreline. And of course, this was especially important for the delegation from Wisconsin. A beautiful leather-bound record was created to commemorate this gathering. This book is a true treasure and a valuable collectible. To appreciate the scale of effort and participation that went into this gathering, you must see the images in this volume. These images allow you to fully enjoy especially the final display of the Sir Knights. The number of mounted companies, the size of the delegations, and the number of spectators on the streets truly make you appreciate these glorious days of the Knights Templar. Oakland Commandery No. 11 appeared to stretch for more than a block. San Jose Commandery No. 10 was almost 2 blocks long. California Commandery, resplendent in its unique uniform, and formed a fully mounted company. And while there were larger groups, of course, from California, every large commandery was impressively visible. The Grand Commandery of Pennsylvania, mounted on identical black horses, did its part to impress the spectators.
Remember, folks, the only way to get to San Francisco back then was from the south or by water, meaning all materials had to be transported, and California itself wasn't even founded until 1850. The 1850 U.S. federal census counted California's population at 92,597. This shows the population census in San Francisco, indicating that the census is either significantly inaccurate if we look at photographs from the period between 1850 and 1900, or that the Tartars were indeed present and well established there. The story goes, in 1846, America annexed California. On July 9, 1846, the USS Portsmouth sailed into San Francisco Bay, and sailors and Marines landed on shore and raised the American flag. The small settlement of Yerba Buena was renamed San Francisco, after the bay, on January 30, 1847. At that time, San Francisco's population was only about 800 people. In 1848, a man named James Marshall discovered gold. News reached New York in December 1848. As a result, people flocked to San Francisco by the thousands, and the population grew tremendously. In 1849, San Francisco's population reached 25,000. This first wave of settlers included many Southerners who brought slaves with them. Even after California gained statehood in 1850 as a free state, thousands of African Americans remained enslaved, supported by fugitive slave laws passed by the California legislature and upheld by the California Supreme Court. However, the growing majority of white men in California, who were the only ones who could vote, embraced the free soil idea of the anti-slavery wing of the Democratic Party. The foreign miners' tax, which lasted until 1852, was intended to expel those called peons, who were men who earned very low wages and directed the products of their labor to their superiors or employers. Spanish-speaking miners were identified as inferior to white men on this pretext and thus faced violent expulsion. After 1852, when most Spanish-speaking miners left, the focus of white miners shifted to Chinese people or foremen. Quickly, a new claim emerged about Chinese laborers who signed contracts and came to work in California. They were coolies. And of course, as we see everywhere, there were fires burning buildings in the 1850s and beyond. These recurring fires shaped the development of both San Francisco and Sacramento, and the years 1849 to 1851 were a period of intense fires in the history of both cities. My novel takes place between 1848 and 1850. Sacramento is one of the main settings in the novel, and there are a few scenes in San Francisco as well. That's why I decided to learn something about the San Francisco and Sacramento fires as a good backdrop. This post focuses on San Francisco. Santa Rosa, California was founded in 1833 and named after Saint Rose of Lima. Before the arrival of the Jesuits, the Santa Rosa Plain was home to a powerful and densely populated tribe of indigenous Pomo people called the Bidecom Tara. This tribe strongly controlled the area, preventing anyone from passing without permission. Those who entered without permission faced severe penalties. The tribe would gather for ceremonial occasions.
The text indicates that the destruction of Great Tartary was part of a great purging that occurred between 1840 and 1930, believed to involve widespread genocide. Moray or Tesla technology, Star Wars now. Tesla's weapons. In the 1930s, Nikola Tesla announced weapons like the Death Ray and the Tesla Shield, capable of destroying thousands of aircraft and being impenetrable. Tesla died in 1943 without revealing the secrets of his inventions. Electromagnetic pulses, or EMPs. The text describes the firing of intense three-dimensional electromagnetic pulses using Fourier transforms, resulting in a violent EMP similar to that of a nuclear weapon. This type of weapon is alleged to have caused the mysterious flashes detected by Vela satellites off the southwest coast of Africa in 1979 and 1980. Directed energy weapons, or DEWs. Tesla's technology is said to have led to the development of Star Wars and combat systems like Tesla blasters.
DEWs are alleged to have been used to precisely bring down world towers and surgically cut houses in half, implying that the collapse of steel-frame skyscrapers can only occur through controlled demolition, and that events like 9/11 have recurred throughout history. Patents for DEWs and electromagnetic guns dating back to 1904 are also mentioned, with their development reportedly beginning as early as 1845. Buried tombs. The Paris catacombs. The text states that over 6 million skeletons are buried beneath the streets of Paris in a 200-mile network of tunnels. The text questions the official narrative that these bones resulted from overcrowded cemeteries, noting that population statistics from that time do not support this number. Other ossuaries. Brno ossuary in the Czech Republic contains the remains of over 50,000 people. The catacombs of San Francisco Convent in Lima, Peru, estimated to hold 70,000 people. Plague pits in London allegedly held the bodies of about 100,000 people who died during the Great Plague between 1665 and 1666. Wall Street. Wall Street and most of New York City's famous financial district are literally built on African slave burial grounds, and New York prospered greatly from the transatlantic slave trade. Destruction of Tartarian structures. Examples of destruction. The collapse of an Italian tower during the demolition of the Panama Pacific International Exposition in 1916. A fire at the Garden Palace in Sydney, Australia in 1882. The demolition of the Trabzon Opera House in Turkey in 1958. Intentional fires in Paris in 1871 destroyed many prominent buildings like the Tuileries Palace and the Louvre Library. Assize courts in Manchester, England, built in 1864, destroyed in 1957. The Reichstag fire in Berlin that, quote, put Hitler in power. Destroyed churches in France and Russia, like the Church of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin in Moscow in 1935. Deliberate destruction. The text suggests that past great fires and bombings may be historical lies to conceal advanced technology. It's claimed that buildings were electrified and directed energy technologies were used to bring them down. Widespread Tartarian genocide in Russia. The Soviet famine of 1921 to 1922, a famine in the Tatar Autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic, led to the deaths of 2 million Tatars, reducing the Tatar population to less than 50% after ethnic Russian settlement. The Soviet famine of 1932 to 1933, the so-called Holodomor, was a major famine that resulted in millions of deaths in key grain-producing regions, including Ukraine. It is recognized as a genocide of the Ukrainian people perpetrated by the Soviet government. Repeated carpet bombing by U.S. allies in 1945. Dresden. After the defeat of Tartary, old buildings, quote, destroyed by wars, were miraculously rebuilt. The text argues that the heavy bombing of Dresden in February 1945, which destroyed 90% of the city center, was not entirely accurate, and that the bombing was selective. The text suggests that directed energy weapons caused the destruction of Dresden after 1945. The Great American Holocaust and the Jesuit Reductions Movement. Indigenous genocide. The text documents that the genocide against the indigenous Black Moors was the largest genocide in history, lasting 4 centuries and claiming tens of millions of lives. New York and Boston fires. The Great New York Fires of 1776, 1835, and 1845, and the Great Boston Fire of 1872 caused widespread destruction, with questions raised about the official causes and the ability to fight these fires.
In conclusion, all these stories make us ask, is the history we learned the complete story? Are there missing pieces, hidden civilizations, and intentional natural disasters? What role did groups like the Jesuits and Freemasons play in shaping the world as we know it? Share your thoughts in the comments below the video, and tell me which story shocked you the most. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new episodes of Mystery and Secrets. Peace out, legends!